Kate Lewis, Marketing Director for Fall for the Book. Welcome, and thank you so much for supporting Fall for the Book today. I'm sorry we have a bit of a late start. It turns out it might be easier to decorate cookies than to film somebody decorate cookies. For other opportunities to support the 2021 festival, become a friend by clicking the green button at the bottom of the screen. If you missed any of this year's festival events, they're still available for viewing. Just go to the Fall for the Book website. During today's presentation, you may ask questions by typing them into the chat. And now, I have the greatest pleasure to introduce our guest. After working in restaurants and hotels for 25 years, most recently as pastry chef at the Blue Duck Tavern in the Park Hyatt Washington, Chef Peter Brett was a chef instructor at the Pastry Arts Program at Stratford University. His recipes have been featured in numerous professional publications and cooking anthologies, including Time Life Old Fashioned Christmas and the Washington Magazine. Chef Brett also created the cake featured on the US Postal Service wedding stamp and was nominated for Pastry Chef of the Year 3 times by the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington. And may I add, he is a big brother extraordinaire, and I could not be prouder to introduce my brother, Peter Brett. Take it away, Peter.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to this evening's event, and thanks so much for supporting Fall for the Book. To tie this in a little bit with the theme of books, I gotta say that one of the good things to come out of COVID, for me anyway, has been I've really upped my reading game. So I wanted to just mention a few books at the beginning of the event tonight. First, my two favorite cookbooks right now, anyway. I have my favorites seem to change. This is a book that was published in 2021 and has just been reissued. It's called The Last Course by Claudia Fleming. She's an extremely talented pastry chef in New York City. And something a little more current. You've probably heard of Yotam Ottolenghi. He's the Israeli English chef who has an empire in London. His dessert cookbook is called Sweet, and I really recommend that. Also, my personal reading, right now I'm reading The Bittersweet Path, again, a book that's been reissued. It was first published in 1950, and it's a coming of age, really, two young men in Mississippi 30 years after the end of the Civil War. And finally, my next read, I've read the first book, and now I want to read the second book in the Regeneration trilogy by Pat Barker. She won the Booker Prize in 1995 for the third volume in the trilogy. Really wonderful books. They're about some of the characters in the books are real. Most notably, the two British war poets, Siegfried Sassoon and oh gosh, who's the other guy? I forget. Anyway, two great books. So on to cookies. So tonight, I'm going to show you a couple of different techniques for decorating some Christmas cookies, holiday cookies. You can also use cookies. Of course, you want them to taste great, but you can also use them as decorations on your tree. Just when you punch out your cookies, also punch out a little hole at the top. You can use the tip of a plain pastry tip. Just punch out a hole before you bake them. And then after they're decorated, you can just attach a ribbon, tie a ribbon through the hole and use them as decorations on your cookies, on your tree. We used to do a cookie tree every year at the hotel. So to begin decorating your cookies, you've got your cookies all baked and ready to go. You want to make what's called a paper cone or a paper cornet. And that's what you will use to put the icing in and actually pipe the icing on the cookies. Start with a sheet of parchment paper. And then you want to create a triangle, a right triangle. And you do that by folding one corner down, making a really, really nice clean crease to create that right triangle. And then a very sharp knife. You want to use a very sharp knife because the trick to a paper cone is a very clean cut on the long end of the triangle. So just with a nice sharp knife, make a nice clean cut. Then you have your triangle. The point of the cone is going to be right in the middle of the long side of the triangle. So bring the two corners down until they meet. Slide them until they meet again on the other side, so that you have a double thickness of paper all around the cone. Then pull up with your thumb to make a nice tight point. You don't want any icing dripping out. You want that point to be closed. So pull up with your thumb, fold the paper down, and then you want to attach it. You can use a paper clip or tape. I think the easiest is a stapler. And there's your cone. So make up your paper cones in advance. I've got about 6 of them here, all made up and ready to go. Once you've made your paper cones, you want to make your icing. So this icing is specifically for decorations. It's called royal icing. And it's just got a few simple ingredients. The confectioner's sugar that I've sifted. You don't want any lumps. The holes in your cornet are going to be very tiny. You don't want the hole in the cornet to get blocked. Your egg whites. If you're concerned about food safety at all, you can use pasteurized egg whites. And then a quarter of a teaspoon of cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is an acid, and that helps to thicken the icing. Then all you want to do now is beat the icing. Start on low, otherwise you'll splash the powdered sugar in your face. So just start on low. I don't know if you can see that. So it will start to get thicker as the sugar dissolves in the egg white. You can increase the speed. I'm just going to stop it so you can see what it looks like now. You can see it's fairly thin and running right now. What you want to do is beat it until it thickens to the consistency that you want. I'm going to beat this until it's very, very thick. And then if we want it to use for something thinner, for a different technique, we can always thin it down a little bit. And the way it gets thick is by beating it. What happens is you incorporate air into the egg white. The sugar and the cream of tartar help to hold the air in the egg white and thicken it. Don't make the mistake of adding more confectioner's sugar. Just keep beating it and it will thicken. So after a few minutes of beating, it should start to thicken up. And I can see that it is starting to hold the shape in the beater. I'm going to stop it again and just lift it up so you can see how much thicker that is already. So it's still thin enough to run, but it has thickened up. I'm going to just thicken up just a little bit more, and then I'll use this icing to demonstrate one technique. All right, I'm going to stop it and see it's stopped running. It's just barely holding a soft shape on the beater. So I think that is good for my purposes. I'm going to so here is my icing. Got the consistency that I want. It's just holding its shape when it comes off the spatula. Now, I like to flavor my icing because I do want to eat these cookies. So I'm just going to add about 1/4 teaspoon of almond extract and just stir that in. You could just leave it plain, or you could use whatever flavoring you like. And there's my icing ready to go. Now I'm going to get my paper cone. When you're working with a paper cone, you don't want to overfill it. That's a mistake that I see a lot of people make. Fill it halfway at most. If you overfill it, it's going to become really hard to pipe. It's going to get really awkward. It's going to start to leak. So just fill it halfway. I don't know if you can see the shadow there, but the icing is coming up to there. So just halfway. Now, to close the bag, you've got this seam with the staple in it. Have that towards you. Fold the 2 corners down away from you, and then fold the top down. And there's your paper cone.
Peter, this is Kate. I've got a question.
Oh.
What if you can't get cream of tartar?
You could use another acid, like you could use 1/4 teaspoon of lemon juice or 1/4 teaspoon of vinegar. Any acid will work.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep. Now I'm going to these are cookies that I made earlier today. So this is the technique we're going to do with the thicker icing, the icing that's going to hold its shape nicely on the cookie. I don't normally sit, but I'm normally at a higher workstation. So this is my dining room table. So I don't think I can bend over for too long, so I'm going to sit. So now you want to cut a hole in your paper cone. Remember, you want your piping to be as thin and fine and delicate as possible. So you want to cut a very small hole. You can always cut the hole again and make it bigger, but you can't make it smaller. So don't overdo it. Just cut a very tiny bit off the tip of your cone. And now I'm going to start piping my snowflake. So just with a nice, steady, even pressure, go from one end to the other. You're bisecting the cookie each time you do this. and then again. I'm just piping loops. And now I'm going to pipe 3 little spikes off the tip of each of these segments of the snowflake. So piping with royal icing is work that requires concentration and a steady hand. And I'm just going to pipe little dots in these spaces all around. And there is our snowflake. All right. So that's one technique. You can also pre-ice a cookie, which is what I've done because I wanted the icing to dry. So I made this Christmas tree earlier today. I iced it. So it's been drying for about 6 or 7 hours. So the surface is nice and smooth and dry. And I'm going to decorate this using this same, this is called a drop or a string technique with the very, very thick royal icing. And I'm going to, I've got some cones already filled here. I think this is red. And I'm going to so I made the hole just a little bit too small. I'm going to pipe drops of gradually descending sizes.
If you could hold that up to the camera, just so that we could take a look, that'd be awesome.
Is that good?
Thank you.
And then I'm going to, with another color, pipe just a few more balls of icing. There we go. So another technique for decorating your cookies with this drop technique. There's also a technique called flooding, and I really like. It's a more sort of a more modern look that I really like. So I'm going to use some thinner icing for that. I've got some icing, some white icing that I made earlier. is a little bit thinner than the royal icing I've got now, although actually it's thickened up a little bit as it's standing. So I think I'm going to thin it down just a little bit. Oh, always cover your royal icing while you're working with it. I've got lots of little bowls here of different colored icing, all covered with plastic wrap. So make sure that while you're working, you cover the icing, because what happens, it dries out, forms a crust on top, and you can stir it to rehomogenize it, but you don't want any lumps in your icing. So I'm just going to, you can thin your royal icing with a liquid like water or milk or lemon juice. I'm going to use just a drop of corn syrup, because the corn syrup gives it just a little bit of a shine, which I like. So I'm going to stir that corn syrup into my royal icing until it's just a little bit thinner. Remember, you can always add more, but you don't want to add too much at the beginning. So I'm going to just add about a teaspoon more. Stir it in, and there I've got a nice fluid icing. Fill your cone. Remember, don't overfill it. You can always fill it again or just use a clean cone. Close the top of your cone, and you're ready to go. All right. I'm going to do these candy canes. My tech guru is directing me here. So just make stripes with the white icing. And then got the red icing.
Peter, another question from the audience.
Yes.
Was the flooding icing the same recipe as the icing you made for us just now? And do we just beat it less, or we just thin it out a little?
You can either beat it less, or you can do what I just did with the corn syrup, or you can use water or lemon juice and thin it out later. So if you want to do two different techniques, then just beat it until it's nice and thick, so it will hold its shape for your drop piping, and then you can thin it down when you want to use the flooding technique.
Great.
Okay. Now, I've got some bamboo skewers. You could use a toothpick, but you just want to pull the bamboo skewer through the lines of icing. So go one way and then the opposite way. And there is your candy cane. Now, I'm going so we made one snowflake with the drop technique. I'm going to make another snowflake with the flooding technique. And again, I'm going to start with the thin, I think this is the thin icing. I gotta make sure. I'm sorry. Okay, here's my flooding icing. And I'm going to just outline the cookie.
Does flooding icing mean it's the thinner icing? Is that right?
Yes. And then you just want, it's called flooding icing because it floods inside that barrier that you've created. So I'm just filling in the interior of the cookie. And I thought I had a spatula. I'll be right back. Sorry, guys. Here's my spatula. So you just want to smooth all the icing. This is one of my favorite tools. Small offset spatula. They're really inexpensive, like, I don't know, $5 or $6. And it's just this and a small paring knife are like my two favorite tools. Here we go. And then I'm going to, with some blue icing, I'm going to create a spiral. So the icing is thickened up a little bit in the tip of the cornet because I made this about an hour ago. So I'm going to start in the middle. And I'm going to spiral out. And this particular design is called a, is that good? This particular design is called a spider web. And as I pull the bamboo skewer through, you can see why. So you go one way, and then you go another way. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to, let's see, we've done that. I'm going to show you what you can do with just some plain shapes. You don't need necessarily to have fancy cutters. If you just have a round cutter, or if you even just want to cut squares by hand. I mean, this is a cutter, a square cutter, but you wouldn't necessarily need a square cutter to cut squares by hand. Just, cut a grid with a chef's knife. And these, you can see, have the holes in them. So these would be perfect for hanging on a tree with some ribbon. So again, with my flooding icing, I'm going to outline the cookie and then fill it in. Use my little offset spatula to flatten the top. Okay, and then I'm going to make some rows of small dots. So I'll use red and green here, sticking with the Christmas theme. And then with your bamboo skewer, you can use a toothpick, pull through the middle of each dot, and you create a string of little hearts. And then go the other way for your other dot color. And there's your decorated cookie. Again, it's clearly Christmas because of the colors, but no special color. It's just your imagination and skill. We can do one of the round cookies. Again, creating a barrier all around the cookie to flood the center of the cookie. I'm going from the edges of the cookie and pulling the icing in to keep that nice clean edge on the icing.
Were the dots that you used on the square cookie that you dragged the skewer through, were those dots the same thickness of icing as the flooding?
Yes. Yes, that's all the flooding icing. The icing has to be the same consistency or it won't pull properly. And now, again, I'll use the red and the green.
What if I make more icing than I can use at the moment? Can I freeze it?
So what I would do is put it in the refrigerator. When you always make more icing than you need, or at least I do. And what you can do is wet a paper towel, squeeze it out, put that damp paper towel directly onto your icing, seal it with plastic wrap, and it will keep, I mean, honestly, that would keep for a week in the refrigerator, no problem. Okay, here are my stripes of red and green against the white cookie. And again, I'm going to use my bamboo skewer to pull one way. Or actually, I was going to pull the other, but I'm pretty happy with that. So again, a way to make decorations for your tree. Let me do, okay, so I did find this really, really cool cookie cutter this year. Christmas sweater. I thought this was awesome. And it works perfectly with this flooding technique. So outline your cookie, fill it in with the icing.
If I were to let that cookie dry as is, could I go back later and then add some icing decorations with a thicker icing?
Absolutely. And that's what we did on this Christmas tree that we did earlier. I had iced it earlier, so the surface was dry, and then I piped the decorations on top of the dry icing. So that's absolutely a technique that you can do. And then for my Christmas sweater, I'm going to pipe decorations around the chest and around the waist and the wrists. I've got some blue icing here this time. And I'll put a stripe of green on there as well. And again, with your pick, you want to just kind of make circular, oh, sorry. So there's my cookie ready to pull with the bamboo skewer. I'm going to make like a circular motion, pulling the icing through. And there's your Christmas sweater. What haven't I done? 10 minutes. About 10 more minutes. Okay. I know what I wanted to do for you guys. So, here we go. I'm gonna take another one of just the plain round cookies. I'm gonna flood it.
If I made a bunch of these in advance, frosted them, could I freeze them for later, or will the frosting get goofy?
Yeah, no, the frosting will, so this frosting is almost 100% sugar, right? It's 2 egg whites and 12 ounces of sugar. Sugar attracts moisture. Sugar is hygroscopic. It pulls moisture out of the air. Your freezer and your refrigerator are high moisture environments. So they're going to pull the moisture out of the air. I'm sure you all know that phenomenon of freezing something, and then when it defrosts, it collects moisture on the outside, right? That's all the moisture as that comes out of your product as it comes up to room temperature. So what you want to do in that case is make your cookie dough, bake the cookies, wrap them really well, freeze them, but then you're going to have to decorate them right before you want to use them.
Okay.
So we're going to make holly and berries in this cookie. So you want to start just making sort of a rough leaf shape. This is with the flooding icing. So we'll make 5 holly leaves, and then pull your pick through the leaf to make the spikes of the holly. And then make the holly berries at the tip of the leaf. Again, another flooding technique for your Christmas cookies. Is that enough? Is that what you're saying? Yeah? Okay. Let's take a look at everything that we've done just here in this short 45 minutes. Did we do a blue one? Oh, yes, we did. Good one. So guys, a nice variety of Christmas cookies. Really, the only limit is your imagination, I think, with something like this. Oh, I forgot my favorite, the sweater. Does anybody have any questions for me before we sign off tonight? What?
No audience questions.
No, no audience questions?
Thank you.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for supporting Fall for the Book. My sister's worked really hard on this, and I'm really happy to help her with it. Also want to give a shout out. This is definitely a family affair. Give a shout out to my husband, Kyle, who was awesome tech support and moral support as well. So thanks very much, guys. Have a good night.